And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink Podcast. My name is Brendan Deek. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated. You can also rate the podcast and review the podcast wherever you do listen to your podcast. It would also be greatly appreciated. My co-host, Mr. Eric Warnsey, is with us like always. And today, we have a very special guest, friend of the show, NFL draft analyst for The Athletic and author of The Beast, Dane Brugler, is in the building. Dane, how are we doing?
Good morning, guys. I appreciate having me on.
No, thanks again for taking time. Really appreciate it. I want to start here. So you have just dropped The Beast. It is a NFL draft guide. It's 278 pages long. Dane, this year's NFL draft guide, how is it compared to other years? Has it been tougher to write? Was it easier to write? Kind of just let us know the process for this year's The Beast.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I try to make it better every year. And this year was challenging, no doubt, because the talent pool in this year's draft is bigger than it's ever been because of that extra COVID year that NCAA gave each college player. A lot of players went back for their 5th or 6th years, and so we have a bigger pool this year. And then we're trying to figure out, okay, the guys that were seniors this year who could also use that extra year, are they going back to school? Are they coming out into the draft? And so cross-checking with every single program, figuring out exactly who's going to be in this draft, that was an exercise in and of itself. And then obviously the scouting reports on all these players, watching all the tape, and then all the extensive background work. I really pride this draft guide on all the background work that it takes, getting on the phone with these guys, getting on the phone with their high school coaches, people that know them, just learning more about them. I think that really understanding where they're going to go. I think we're better suited by understanding where they're from. And I think that really helps the process. So that, and I've got baby twins at home, 4 kids total now. So it's been a crazy last year to put this together. I was very, very proud to release it into the wild finally. And so the feedback's been awesome. So it's been really fun to see.
Nice. So my biggest takeaway from The Beast was that Kvonn Thibodeau is the number 8 overall prospect, according to you. Mm-hmm. Do you think his stock dropped throughout the year, or other players passed him in terms of prospects?
I think you could look at it both ways. I think with Kvonn, he came into this draft cycle as the top guy. And going back in August, before the college football season, I released my initial top 50, and Kvonn Thibodeau was number 1 on that list. But I also, wrote in the explanation that he's not Chase Young, he's not Myles Garrett, he's not the Bosa brothers, he's not on that level of that top tier pass rusher that we have seen. I wanted to make sure that was clear from the get go. But he was still a really good player because he's athletic. I think he's very good versus the run. There's a lot to like about Kvonn Thibodeau. And then as the season went on, he's banged up a little bit, talking to teams, the teams have some concerns with him. He's not going to be for everybody, just with, the way he carries himself and, his priorities. It's something where teams have some question marks there. And then as a player, the comparison that a lot of teams use is Jadeveon Clowney, who was the number 1 overall pick back in 2014. And so Kvonn Thibodeau has that type of talent where he's going to be at the top of the draft, but there are some question marks there in terms of him becoming a top 5 to 7 pass rusher in the NFL, being a true, living up to being that number 1 overall pick, which Jadeveon Clowney, really hasn't done. He's been a solid player, an important player for some teams, but living up to that number 1 overall pick, he really hasn't been able to do that. But you enter in Aidan Hutchinson and what he did this year out of Michigan. You enter Trayvon Walker. I've been a big Trayvon Walker fan since the fall, since October, and when I first got my eyes on him. So when you enter in some of these other players, that pushed him down a little bit as well.
Okay, so you just mentioned a guy, Trayvon Walker. There's been a lot of buzz about him going 1st overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Are you buying this Trayvon Walker number 1 train, or are you thinking this is just a bunch of smoke?
Oh, no, I think it's certainly possible. If Trayvon Walker went number 1 overall, I would not be surprised at all. Aidan Hutchinson's a good player, But, I think this is a case of ceiling versus floor. With Aidan Hutchinson, you don't really see that super high ceiling with him, but you have a good idea of what you're getting. It is a high floor in terms of, week in, week out, you have a good idea of what you're going to get from Aidan Hutchinson. With Trayvon Walker, you feel like he's a guy just scratching the surface. 6'5", 272, 35.5-inch arms, ran a 4.51, which that'll make some cornerbacks jealous with a 4.51 at 270 pounds. And to see him work out during drills was really, really impressive to see this guy move. But to be honest with you, those are the testing numbers. But I mean, he was my number 6 overall prospect before the combine. I mean, I fell in love based on the tape. And yes, based on that scheme, he was asked to hold the point of attack and play the run. But when he did get those pass rush opportunities, he looked like a guy that was just different. I mean, and I've been saying this since the fall. I would not be surprised at all if Trayvon Walker is the best defensive player to come out of this draft class. And so, with that thinking, you add in everything he did at the combine. It would not be hard to talk yourself into Trayvon Walker at number 1, in my opinion. Now, and if he doesn't go 1, I think he's going 2 or 3. So even a team like the Jets at number 4, I don't think they'll even have a shot at Trayvon Walker.
All right, I want to switch over to the quarterback position. Last year, we had 5 total go in the first round. How many quarterbacks do you envision going this year in the first round?
Yeah, not only the first round, but the top 15, which we've never had before. Right. Last year it was crazy. This year it's crazy, but for kind of differing reasons. We're going to have quarterbacks go in the first round, but how early, to what teams, and how many, those are the key questions that, you ask different teams, you get different answers. I think that we'll see 3 quarterbacks go in the first round. Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, and Desmond Ridder. Now, the order, I don't feel confident about. Where that run starts, I don't feel confident about. I do think we're going to see these guys go early just because quarterbacks always get pushed up. Could that be Carolina at 6? Maybe. They have not hid their interest in these quarterbacks. They brought them all in, trying to figure them out, trying to figure out if there's a fit there. You look at Atlanta at 8, moving on from Matt Ryan. What's the long term of that franchise? Do they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks? Seattle at 9 has a quarterback big question mark there long term. So there's plenty of teams that you could see potentially going that direction. But we thought that last year with the Falcons and Carolina, and they ended up passing on Justin Fields and Mac Jones, and I'm sure there's a little bit of maybe some regret there. And does that make them go for a quarterback this year? So it's a really interesting mix. And then you look at the Steelers at 20. They're the team that is lurking, and they've shown in the past they have never been scared to trade up to get their guy. They did with Troy Polamalu. They did a couple of years ago with Devin Bush. If they fall in love with one of these quarterbacks, what will they go up and try and get that guy? Or they just stand pat, stay at 20, and see if he falls to them. So I think when it's all said and done, we see 3 quarterbacks go in the first round. But where exactly, we're going to see some trade action. I think that's very likely. Like you said, we're 2 weeks out from the draft, and I still feel like there's a lot we don't know about these quarterback destinations.
So in your top 100 rankings, in your top 100 rankings, you don't have a quarterback until number 30. If Kenny Pickett slotted 30, then you Malik Willis slotted at number 32. Can you remember a year like this? Is this like just an outlier year for this? Would any of the top 4 quarterbacks, like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and any of the guys, Trevor Lawrence from last year, would have been number 1 in this draft class, no matter what?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, if we had the 5 quarterbacks from last year, I think all 5 would go ahead of any quarterback this year. It's not as bad as that 2013 quarterback class, which EJ Manuel, and he was a first round pick, and Geno Smith was a second round pick. Ryan Nassib was in that group. Matt Barkley. It's not on that level, which was just as bad as it gets in terms of a quarterback class. But it's not that far off. I think it reminds me a lot of it was a 2011 class when we had Cam Newton go 1, so exclude Cam. But then after that, you had Jake Locker, you had Blaine Gabbert, you had Christian Ponder, all go in the top 12 picks. And I think this group is kind of similar to that, where they're going to get pushed up, whether or not they really should. When it comes down to it, I think that when you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, that means you believe that at some point during their rookie contract, you think they will be a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And I just find it very hard to have any conviction in any of these quarterbacks that they will reach that status. Now, Malik Willis, I think he has the upside to do it. He does. The size, he's not the tallest guy, but he's compact. He's built. He has an outstanding arm. He's an electric athlete. But in terms of field vision, in terms of anticipation, he has miles to go in terms of that development. And it's not that he's deficient in those areas. It's more he's just unproven in those areas because of the offense that he played in college. Kenny Pickett, we talk about the ceiling floor argument with pass rusher. With Kenny Pickett, it's kind of similar there where you wonder, okay, I feel good that he can come in and win games for us as a rookie. But is he a guy that's ever going to lead us to the Super Bowl? Does he have that type of ability? Is he cap out at a Andy Dalton or even a Kirk Cousins? Is that where his ceiling is as a player? And so that all of a sudden you factor that in, maybe you're not as high on Kenny Pickett. And then Desmond Ridder, I think he's a little bit of both, where he can come in and start right away, but he still has some development to do. It's just a really, really weird quarterback class that differing opinions throughout the league. Some teams like Matt Corral, some like Sam Howell. So the varying opinions from team to team is really fascinating, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see it play out on draft weekend.
All right. So it seems like every year the wide receiver position is just loaded. This year, which wide receiver would you say has the highest ceiling? Not necessarily who you think will get taken first, but which player has the highest ceiling at the wide receiver position?
I'd probably say Jameson Williams from Alabama. And it was fun watching Alabama on Saturdays last year on offense, because with Jameson Williams on the field, that at any time lightning could strike. I mean, he has special speed, and he's not a track guy that's out there trying to play football. He understands route leverage. He understands how to throttle down. He understands how to create those pockets of separation. Maybe not the most natural hands, but he can adjust and he catches the ball well. So I think with Jameson Williams, a guy that really just a one-year starter in college, was at Ohio State, blocked on the depth chart there, transfers to Alabama, and had this tremendous season in the SEC. Coming off an ACL injury, that's an important part of his evaluation, obviously. But you factor in where he still has to grow and get better. Jameson Williams, there are some teams, even with the ACL, still believe he's a top receiver in this draft. Probably won't be the first drafted because of that injury and the durability questions. But somewhere in the top 20, Jameson Williams he's going to go. And I think a team's going to bet on that upside and that potential and that big playability, what he can mean for an offense.
Okay, so I want to stick with the wide receiver position here, and I am so in love with Treylen Burks. I've watched this guy. He's probably the most tape I've watched on any player. Can't get enough of him. I find him so exciting. He reminds me of kind of AJ Brown with more juice, if that makes sense. Where do you see him going, and what am I missing here? Like, why isn't he kind of getting more love for the number one receiver out of this class? Because I know he did go to Arkansas, so I know that he wasn't on. Arkansas did have a very tough schedule in the SEC this year, but he wasn't always on the primetime Saturday slots. I know the quarterback struggled a little bit at Arkansas too, so he obviously didn't get as many routes thrown to him and whatnot. So what am I missing here with Treylen Burks? What are his weaknesses here, and where do you put him in your wide receiver rankings?
Yeah, he's my number 5 receiver. And, it's funny because, at different points, you talked yourself into these receivers where Burks is my number 2 guy. Now he's my number 3 guy. And just it's been, you wake up on a different day and you have a different opinion of how you want to stack these guys because they each bring something different from Garrett Wilson to Chris Olave to Drake London to Jameson Williams. And then with Burks, they're very different. And they're all receivers. They're all in the same stack, but they offer something a little bit different. And with Burks, I think the biggest worry with him is he's underdeveloped and unproven as a true outside receiver. He was a slot player for Arkansas. They'd let him in the backfield, really manufacture those touches because he was the best player on the field. So they wanted to get him the football. And then he goes to the combine and he underwhelmed a little bit at 225 pounds. He's a big guy, obviously. 4.55 in the 40, which at 225 pounds is not a bad time, but I think we were expecting more. When you watch him on tape, he doesn't get caught from behind. I mean, no one in the SEC had more plays of 20+ yards than Treylen Burks. And so with you think about what you saw on tape, and you expected these at better times, and he just wasn't able to do that. And I think part of it is his weight. I mean, I was told that at the end of the season he was close to 240 pounds. So that's something you have to monitor and watch. And I think it's just a lack of experience as a true X receiver, going up against press coverage, winning, consistently down the field on the outside. He's done it. I mean, you can point to examples on tape where he has done it, but consistently. I think that's where some of the doubt creeps in for teams. But nonetheless, this is still a first-round player. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And you look at the Cowboys at 24, the Bills at 25. I mean, there's several teams that I think we're maybe happy to see that 4.55 at the combine, because all of a sudden the teams in the 20s are like, oh, maybe we have a shot at him now. So some of those teams were not too upset that Burks didn't blow everybody away in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and he has breakaway speed too. I noticed, like he's never really got caught from behind in college, if that makes sense.
I want to go over to the offensive tackle position, and it's kind of been said that the top two dogs are Evan Neal and Ekwonu. Charles Cross is getting some steam. Do you think he'll close the gap and it'll be a 3-horse race, or is it just those two guys at the top kind of ahead of the pack?
Well, on my board, my top 100, I have all 3 of the top 7. So I think they're pretty close. Charles Cross, talk about his movement patterns. You talk about his hand exchange. He's as good as it gets in this draft in terms of pass protection. The big question with Cross is just as a run blocker. Can he develop in that area? That's where the concern is, coming from that air raid offense, which wasn't asked to do it a ton. But with Cross, I think it's easy to get excited about his frame. He's only a redshirt sophomore. He's still a very young player, and what he's going to develop into. So Charles Cross, he's going to go somewhere in the top half of round 1. It's just a matter of could he get above Evan Neal or Ekwonu? Each team will kind of look at it differently based on what they're looking for. But I'm a big Icky fan from NC State. He's my number 2 overall player in the draft. 6'4", 310, explosive player. Dominant as a run blocker, but the strides that he made as a pass protector, that's what really sold me on Icky Ekwonu. I think he's a guy that's still getting better as his technique, as his awareness continue to mature and get better. He's only going to become a more dominant player. So whether you want to play him at guard, whether you want to play him at tackle, Icky can do it all. And that's why I think in this draft, I'll be surprised if he doesn't go somewhere in the top 5 picks. And then Evan Neal, I think, he's an interesting player that has played 3 different positions each of the last 3 years. So you have the position flexibility with him. 6'7.5", 335 pounds. And when you look at him, you don't know where those 335 pounds are, because he's so sleek for his size. It's really, really something. And I mean, he moves well for that size, very smooth, very flexible, falls off some blocks. You want to see him tidy that up. But all 3 of these guys are easy to get excited about how they can come in, help your offensive line really from day one.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. They're all born within about a month of each other, too. There's just no difference in age. I think all 3 of them are going to be top 10 picks and have successful careers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you compare it to last year, I don't know if any of them would go ahead of Penei Sewell, ahead of Rashawn Slater. So I don't know that they're your traditional top 5 type of tackles, but they're really good players who I think are going to come in and contribute right away.
I wanted the rewind button, Dane, to kind of last year's draft. And which player surprised you the most with the season that they had in the 2021 NFL season? Is there a guy that you thought would struggle and played well, or is there a guy that you thought would have played better and struggled? How do you think these guys kind of panned out, in your opinion?
Well, it's hard not to look at the quarterbacks. Zach Wilson to the Jets. I think you expected a little bit more. He was very up and down. You saw he started to get better towards the end of the season, which is what you want to see from a rookie quarterback. You just want to see progress. But it's hard when he just doesn't have a lot around him in terms of the offensive line, all the issues that they had, the receivers, and you can say the same thing about Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. Justin Fields in Chicago. So Mac Jones being the most productive of those first, I guess when in hindsight, maybe it shouldn't be surprising because Mac Jones was the most NFL ready. Doesn't have the ceiling as those other quarterbacks, but in terms of being able to come in, contribute right away, I guess it shouldn't have been surprising. But just the fact that those other quarterbacks struggled as much as they did, it's going to be a big year too for all three of those guys, and Trey Lance as well. Throw him into the mix, even though we didn't see as much with him. So we talked about how these quarterbacks, how 5 went in the top 15. Something we've never seen before. Now it's time for these guys to live up to it, and this is for franchises like the Jets who have 2 first-round picks this year. They've got 2 early picks in the second round. This is a chance for them to help out a young quarterback. So do they go receiver with one of those top 10 picks? Do they go with another offensive lineman just to try to make things easier on their quarterback? What do they do in terms of the support system? So that's something that I think is going to be interesting with those quarterbacks or with the teams that drafted quarterbacks early last year. See how they support those guys in the first round, second round this year.
So my last question for you, I'm going to get out of here on the defensive side of the ball. Kyle Hamilton's a guy I'm really intrigued by. Do you have a player comparison for him?
There really isn't an apples to apples comparison with him. He's so different. A guy that's 6'4", 220. Safeties just don't look like this. I think if you took Isaiah Simmons, come out of Clemson a couple years ago, and then Justin Simmons, safety for the Broncos, and you kind of mashed them together, the result would look something like a Kyle Hamilton. He's just a long athlete, those long strides. He's got range. He could play that single high position, play split safety, can work in the box. You could just do so many things with him. But I think you have to have a plan when you draft him, because he is so versatile. But in order to really maximize his talent and what he can do, you have to have a plan for how, based off of what the offense is doing, how you're going to deploy Kyle Hamilton. And so a lot of teams are going to be just not interested in a safety that unique that early in the draft. But I think somewhere 11 overall, 12 overall, 13 overall, the Washington, Minnesota, Houston, somewhere in that range, I think is going to be the sweet spot for Kyle Hamilton, where we're going to see him come off the board.
Oh man, I would love him to fall to 50 to Philly.
Scenario. I think there's a few of those guys. I'm working on a mock right now, a 7-round mock, and I've got the Eagles. I think Jordan Davis at 15. And I think that's a guy that Howie wouldn't be able to pass on in terms of plugging him in the middle of that defensive line, what he could mean for that defensive front. So I've got him. This will be up on the Athletic this week, but I'll give you Philly's first 2 picks: Jordan Davis at 15, and then Drake London at 18, which I think would be a home run for that team.
Dane, don't tease me like that right now. It's too early to tease me like that. But I actually think the Eagles are going to end up with either a Jordan Davis or Devontae Wyatt. I think Howie likes the defensive tackle position too much, where I don't think he'll let one of those guys go by him. But last question for you here. The cornerback position is really intriguing to me. I think there's a top number 1 in Sauce Gardner. Quickly, how high do you think he goes? I don't think he makes it past 5. Is that crazy here?
I think he might, but I'll say I don't think he gets past 7.
Okay.
One of those Giants picks, I think. He could very easily go top 5. I think that with the Jets, that's interesting because philosophically, I'm not saying that right. Philosophically,
you got
it. Okay. They talk about Joe Douglas, GM, Robert Saleh, head coach. They want more pass rush, than prioritizing the back end. And so I think more likely we see the Jets go with someone in the front that's going to help put pressure on the quarterback. But could we see Sauce Gardner go 3? Sure, I think that's possible to the Texans. 5, yeah, but I think offensive line is going to be the priority for the Giants. And so I think offensive line 5, Sauce Gardner at 7. That might be an ideal scenario for the Giants.
Okay, quickly, last question here. Who is the second cornerback taken? Because there's kind of a bunch in a little bucket here. You got Trent McDuffie,
right?
Stingley, Andrew Booth. Who do you think ultimately is the second cornerback taken?
I think it'll be Stingley, based off of what he did at his pro day, which is good to see him moving around out there. Teams still have some questions. Obviously, he's not a super clean player with the durability pass. Teams wondering, okay, is he tough through injuries, things like that. But I think when it's all said and done, Trent McDuffie, I'm a big fan. He's my number 2 corner personally, but I think the lack of length is going to hurt him. And then Andrew Booth, he might fall out of the first round completely just because of the durability concerns. Multiple surgeries this spring, hasn't been able to work out for teams. A really good player who has that discount sticker on him because of the injury questions.
Dane Brugler, NFL draft analyst for The Athletic. Thanks so much for joining us. Before you go, why don't you plug in anything you got coming out, and why don't you plug in the Beast?
Yeah, I've got the 7-round mock come out this week on The Athletic. And then, make sure you check out the draft guide. If you like the NFL draft at all, 0% chance you'll be disappointed with what it has to offer. And all you need is a subscription to The Athletic, and you got it as part of that. So I think it's a great value.
Thanks so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks guys.